Hi, Paolo Paulino here, and in this video, I'd like to share with you about how I grip the gun and how I manipulate the trigger. Alright, now let's talk about how I grip the gun. But first of all, let's check that the firearm is clear. Alright, now I would like my strong hand to be as high up as possible the firearm. The higher the purchase, the better and the more leverage I will have over the firearm. The lower you are, the more leverage the gun will have over you. So you want to be as high up as possible for maximum recoil management. Now, when I grip, I don't try and crush the firearm. Right? I make sure I try to pinch the firearm into my hand. I do that by slightly pushing with the base of my thumb inward. So I'm locking the gun into my hand. And I'm using the two middle fingers to push directly into my hand. All right, I'm not trying to grip the whole grip, but rather I'm trying to push the gun directly into the palm of my hand. Now, I don't grip with my pinky because sometimes when I do, I tend to move the gun a little bit, enough to throw off the shot. So I keep my pinky relatively relaxed. So I'm pushing firearm in, locking it into place with the base of my thumb, and that's what it would look like. So it's more of like a rock and roll sign. Now my support hand will extend and slightly bend. Now this bend is very important because it gives you mechanical leverage over the firearm and locks the wrist in place. Having the wrist straight gives the gun, again, more leverage over you, which we do not like. Right, another thing people ask me about is how much do you grip? How much strength should you apply when gripping the firearm? Now, it will slightly vary in terms of actual measurement of strength, but a guide that I use is that I tell people to grip the gun, grip it as hard as you can until it starts shaking, and then slowly release until it stops shaking. Now that's where you want to stay. It's not too strong, but not too light either. So you want to have the right amount of pressure, wherein you have a good grip, enough to control the gun firmly, but also not too strong that your whole hand tenses and you can't move your trigger finger properly. So it has to be relaxed enough that you can manipulate your trigger finger without tensing up too much. I also get asked how much do I distribute the pressure between my two hands. And there are varying thoughts about this. Like some people say you grip more with the support, grip more with the strong hand and whatnot. For me, I try to keep it balanced. I try to grip it the same because I find out, well, relatively the same. It's not exactly the same, but I find it that if I keep things balanced, the recoil impulse is much more predictable, where it just goes up and down. And if I tend to add more pressure to either side, the recoil, the way the gun lifts, starts going like in random different positions. So when I keep it equal and I fire a shot, the recoil simply just goes up and down, which is easier to track and easier to predict. Right, now let's talk about how I manipulate the trigger. I usually break my trigger pulls into two types. One for more accurate and difficult shots, and one for more close range shooting or faster paced shooting at closer, easy targets. Now how I deal with easy targets is I simply pull the trigger in one motion. So I take up the slack and activate the trigger in one motion. Now, how I'm able to do that without disturbing the sight picture, the important thing to note is that when trying to slap the trigger, you're trying to I want you to slap it in a consistent speed, if that makes sense. All right, example is if you are, let's just say, pulling the trigger at 10 kilometers an hour. I want you to finish the pull also at 10 kilometers an hour. I don't want you to accelerate the trigger pull. And this is important because the acceleration is generally what causes the gun to move off target for whatever reason. Well, not whatever reason, but either you're preempting it or you're moving the gun because you're slamming the trigger too hard. You don't want to apply more pressure than is needed. If you have a 3-pound trigger pull, then you roughly only need 3.1 pounds. If you have a 1-pound trigger pull, you only need a 1.1 pound trigger amount of pressure rather. So you don't want to accelerate and you don't want to add more than what you need. So you simply put your finger on the trigger, pull in one motion. By doing so, it allows you to activate the trigger with maximum accuracy while maintaining speed. Now for further targets, I do what is called a prep and press. Now what that means is I simply take up the slack, and the slack is the dead space in the trigger. Right? Some finely tuned guns have less slack, some guns have more slack. Either way, you take up the slack till you hit the wall. The wall is when the trigger starts to engage the sear and the trigger and the hammer, and simply pull. All right. What's important is the actual pull. So you can take up the slack as fast as you want, because it doesn't necessarily affect the shot. So you want to take up the slack and hit the wall. Now once you're at the wall, that's where you want to just have a constant amount of pressure to activate the hammer and fire the shot. So it looks like this. Now with some guns with a double action pull, it's simply doing the same thing, right? Now with closer targets, you simply pull through the double action in one motion. Again, noting that you do not have to apply more pressure than is needed, nor do you want to accelerate as you're pulling the trigger. All right? So it'll look like this. Now for further targets, I say the first shot when you have to do a double action pull is further or more difficult, you simply do the prep and press. But with a double action, you're not really taking up much of the slack, but rather taking half of the travel of the trigger. All right, so you're prepping halfway and then pulling the rest of the way. So you want to take the half as fast as possible and then simply maintain a constant speed at the second half. So it'll look like this. Now with dry firing, people also ask me, how do you practice your trigger pull? Like especially with a gun that has 2 trigger pulls. It has a double action and a single action pull. So rather, I practice both. I do my draws, and I do my prepping and pressing. I also practice my full double action pulls. And then I do condition 2s where I wrap the slide. And then when I'm doing more than one target, like for example, I'm setting up like a stage, what I do is I draw and I fire the double action. And then I don't reset all the way. I just reset roughly where my single action would normally reset. And then I just move the trigger as if I was firing single action. So one double action pull, and then the rest would be single action pulls. Of course, it will just end up being a dead trigger, but at least it still helps me remember or create the muscle memory so that I can remember where that range of motion is to be more efficient once I'm actually firing at the range. So I hope these tips help you improve your accuracy and your speed when on the range. And remember, always stay safe. Don't forget to drop a like and subscribe, and throw down in the comments what other stuff you would like me to cover in my next video.